Chapter 1. Just Another Pilgrim. There she is. Again before my eyes flow that mighty Siberian river, the Ob. I had finally reached the settlement where regular passenger service stopped and was standing on the riverbank. In order to continue my journey to the spot where I could begin my trek through the taiga to Anastasia's glade, I would have to hire a small motorboat. Beside one of the many boats tied up along the shore, 3 men were laying out some fishing tackle. I said hello to them and mentioned I was ready to pay good money for transport to such and such a place along the Ob. Oh my gosh, that's Yegoryich's department. He charges a 500,000 rubles for the trip there. Footnote, approximately $100 at the current exchange rate, an exceptionally high price, roughly equivalent to an average of Russians' monthly income. I was concerned right off when I heard that someone here was already making passenger runs to the tiny Siberian village, hidden way up north in the taiga. It was only 25 kilometers from there to Anastasia's glade, and the prices they were charging. It meant there must be takers. Demand creates a price like that. However, bargaining was something one did not do in the north, and so I asked, "And where do I find this Yegorich? He's somewhere in the settlement, most likely at the store. See over there, where the little tykes are playing. That's his boat. His grandson, Vasya, is with them. He'll run and fetch him. Go ask him." No sooner had I greeted Vasya, a bright-looking lad of 12 or thereabouts, than he started rattling off. "So you need to go there to see Anastasia? Wait just a moment. I'll go call my gramps in a sec." Without waiting for an answer, Vasya went dashing off to the settlement. I realized quite clearly he didn't need an answer. It was apparent that any strangers in these parts, in Vasya's opinion, had but one goal in mind. I made myself as comfortable as I could by the riverbank and began to wait. There being nothing else to do, I stared at the water and drifted into thought. The river was a good kilometer across at this point. Here amidst the boundless taiga, which you couldn't see the whole of even from an airplane. The river had been flowing on down through the centuries. What had it carried away of the past without leaving so much as a trace? What do these Ob waters remember from those times? Perhaps they remember how Yermak, the conqueror of Siberia, pressed by his foes with his back against the river Ob, single-handedly tried to repel an enemy attack, and how his blood from a fatal wound seeped into the river, which they carried off his enervated body to goodness knows where. What did Yermak in fact conquer? Perhaps his deeds weren't that much different from the racketeering that goes on in modern times. Perhaps it is only the river that is in a position to judge today. Footnote, Yermak, aka Yermolai Timofeyevich, 1540 to 1585, a Cossack ataman, or chieftain, credited with heroic exploits in his campaign to open up the Siberian wilderness to Russian civilization. In early August 1585, he was killed in a battle against the Tartar Khan Kuchum on the river Ob. Or perhaps of greater importance to the river may have been the raids of the Genghis Khan's troops. In ancient times, his horde was considered great indeed. There is a regional center near Novosibirsk, today known as Ordinsko, which includes a village called Genghis, Genghis. Perhaps the river remembers how Genghis's hordes retreated with their plundered booty. How they seized a young Siberian maiden, while a mighty vizier, starry-eyed with love, eloquently begged her to go with him of her own free will, and with no resistance. The maiden remained silent, her eyes lowered. All the soldiers under the vizier's command had already fled, while he stayed and kept courting her with loving words. Finally, he tossed her up onto the back of his steed along with a bag of gold, leapt into the saddle, and made full speed for the banks of the Ob to escape his pursuers. They began to catch up to him. The vizier started throwing the gold at them, and when the bag was empty, he began tearing off his precious metals that he had been awarded for conquering various lands and throwing them on the ground under his pursuers' feet. But he did not relinquish the maiden. With frothing mane, the steed carried him to the canoes at the shore of Ob. The vizier carefully helped the maiden down from his steed and seated her in one of the boats. Then he jumped in himself. But as he was pulling the boat away from the shore, he was pierced by an arrow from the pursuing forces right behind them. The current began to carry the boat downstream. The wounded vizier lay near the stern, not even aware of the 3 large rowing canoes filled with soldiers coming ever closer. He looked tenderly at the maiden sitting calmly and quietly beside him, and fell silent himself. He had no strength left to speak. And the maiden looked at him, and then, with a glance at the overtaking canoes, she smiled faintly at them, or maybe at something else, tore the ropes off her hands and threw them into the water. Then this young Siberian maiden took to the oars, and none of the pursuers' craft could catch up to the boat carrying her and the wounded vizier. To what place and into what age did the river current carry them? And what might the muddied waters of the river be carrying off at this moment in their memory of us? Perhaps, dear river, you consider our big cities to be important. A huge city, Novosibirsk, stands on the banks of the Ob, closer to its source in the south. Can you feel its great size and majesty, dear river? Of course, there is no doubt you would have a great deal to tell about it. You would say it pours a lot of pollution into you, so that your once life-giving waters are no longer drinkable. But what can we do about it? Where are we going to channel the waste from all the factories? After all, we, unlike our forebears, are in the process of developing. We have a lot of scientists working in the multitude of academic centers around Novosibirsk. And if we don't channel our waste into you, we shan't survive ourselves. And so the stench has made it hard to breathe in the city, and in some districts the smell is so bad, and nobody even knows what it's from. Try to make sense of all this, dear river. Do you know the technology we have today? Instead of noiseless canoes, it's diesel ships that are now plying your waters, including, at one time, my own. I wonder whether the river remembers me, how I sailed up and down it on my ship, the largest passenger vessel in our fleet. It wasn't new, of course, the ship, and at full speed, all its diesel engines and propellers made such a roar that it was even hard to hear the music in the bar. What does the river cherish in its memory as the most important thing? In times I would watch its shores from the upper deck of my ship, from the windows of the bar at the stern, listening to Malenin's songs and romances. Footnote, Alexander Nikolaevich Malenin, a popular Russian singer-songwriter from Ekaterinburg, a large industrial city in the Urals. Lyrics. I was going to the city upon a white steed, when a pub mistress smiled at me sweetly indeed. Having caught on the bridge the old miller's sly glance, I remained the whole night with that mistress entranced. The people busy with their activities along the shore seemed at the time to me petty and insignificant. Now I was one of them. Another thing I thought about was how to convince Anastasia not to prevent me from communicating with my son. The situation was a strange one indeed, the way it had turned out. All my life I dreamt of having a son. I pictured how I would play with him as a little tyke, and then how I would raise him. When my son grew up, he would be a great help to me. We would be business partners. Now I have a son, and even though he's not around, it's still a jolly thing to know that somewhere on the earth there's a human being as close to you as that, your own flesh and blood, someone you very much wanted. Before leaving, I took great delight in purchasing for my son all sorts of basic kitty things. Anyway, I went and bought them, sure, but whether or not I'll be able to give them to him, well, that's still a question mark. If my son had been born by an ordinary woman, it wouldn't matter whether she were a country or a city girl. It would all be so simple and straightforward. Any woman would be delighted that her child's father was concerned and really trying to provide him with everything he needed and take part in his upbringing. In fact, if he didn't do this voluntarily, a lot of women would be applying for alimony. But Anastasia was a taiga recluse with her own views on life and her own understanding of values. Even before our son's birth, she made it clear to me. He doesn't need any material goods in your sense of the term. He will have everything he needs right from the start. You have the desire to give our baby some sort of senseless trinkets, which he doesn't need at all. You are the only one who needs them for your own self-satisfaction, so you can say, "Look how good and attentive I am." Why on earth would she say something like that? He doesn't need any material goods. Come on now. What can a parent give his newborn child then, especially a father? It's still too early to start raising a breastfeeding infant in the fatherly way. Let me say that again since I scooted something over. It's still too early to start raising a breastfeeding infant in the fatherly way. How then can I express my relationship to him? How can I show him I care for him? A mother can breastfeed her baby. It's easy for her. She's already doing something. But what can a father do? In civilized circumstances, he can help around the house, fix things up, take financial care of his family. But Anastasia doesn't need anything like that. All she has is her glade in the taiga. Her household takes care of itself and waits on her hand and foot, which means the boy will get the same treatment once he's seen as coming from her. I wonder how much it would cost to buy that kind of service. Sure, one can purchase or get a long-term lease on a few hectares of land easy enough. But what price can you put on the love and loyalty of a she-wolf, a she-bear, bugs, and an eagle? Maybe Anastasia doesn't need any of the accomplishments of our civilization. But why should the child have to suffer for his mother's crazy worldview? The child can't even have normal toys. She sees everything her own way. The child doesn't need senseless trinkets. They'll only do him harm, distract him from the truth, she says. Maybe in what she says there is some sort of quirky exaggeration or even downright superstition. There must be some reason mankind has invented so many different toys for kids. But so as not to quarrel with Anastasia, I didn't buy him any rattles. Instead, I got him a kitty's constructor set, where the label on the box reads, "Develops children's intellect," along with a quantity of disposable diapers, which the whole world uses today, and I bought a whole lot of powdered baby food. I'm really amazed at how easy they've made it. You open the box and there's a hermetically sealed package of waterproof foil. You just take a pair of scissors, cut open the packet, pour the content into the warm water, stir, and presto, it's all ready. They've got all sorts of powders, buckwheat, rice, and other cereal grains. The box says that it has all sorts of vitamin additives. I remember back when my daughter Polina was really little, having to go every day to the children's kitchen, and now all you need to do is buy a bunch of boxes and you can feed your own child with no trouble whatsoever. You don't even have to heat it up. Just dissolve it in water and that's it. I knew Anastasia didn't boil herself any water, and so before buying up a whole lot, I bought a single box and tried adding the contents to water at room temperature, and it worked. I tried tasting it. It tasted normal, hardly any flavor, because there was no salt, but likely that's the way it should be for kids. I decided Anastasia wouldn't be able to come up with any arguments against this powder. It would be silly to say no to a convenience like that, and that means she'll have to start showing a little respect to our technocratic world. It doesn't just produce weapons, it thinks about children too. Footnote, Children's Kitchen, a government-subsidized community canteen where parents, particularly mothers who were not breastfeeding, could go to get fresh dairy products, specially prepared for infants and young children. To the village. What village? 6 houses with people just barely alive. You call that a village? Who needs a village like that? Wait. I just skipped a page. Forgive me. Backtrack. But the thing that disturbed me most about what Anastasia said, especially since it didn't seem to make any sense, was this. She said that in order for me to communicate with my son, I would have to achieve a certain purity of thought. In other words, cleanse my inner parts. Only it wasn't clear to me just what inner parts I should cleanse. It would have been understandable if she'd said I should shave or shouldn't smoke when I visited the child, or I should wear clean clothing. But she goes and talks on and on about conscious awareness and inner purging. And just where do they sell the brush that I can purge anything there with? Anyway, what have I got inside me that's so dirty? Maybe I'm not better than others, but I'm no worse either. Hey, if every woman started making a demand like that on her man, you'd have to set up a bloody purgatory for all of mankind. It's illegitimate, that's what it is. I brought along a clipping from the Civil Code, where it says that one parent has no right to deprive the other of seeing their child without due cause, even if the parents are divorced. Of course, our laws don't mean very much to Anastasia, but still, it's a pretty strong argument. After all, the majority of people do observe the law. I ought to be able to take a hard line with Anastasia, too. We should have equal rights to our child. I had thought earlier of taking a harder line with her, but now I've had some doubts about my initial decision, and here's why. Along with everything else in my backpack, I had brought along some letters from readers. I didn't bring them all because I kept getting so many. I wouldn't begin to have room for them all. Many of the readers care a great deal about Anastasia. They call her a messiah, a fairy of the taiga, a goddess. They dedicate songs and poems to her, and some of them address her as though she were their bosom friend. This flood of letters got me reconsidering my words and actions in respect to Anastasia. I had about a 3-hour wait sitting beside Yegorich's boat. It was already late in the afternoon when I saw 2 men approach in the company of Yegorich's grandson. The first was getting on in years. He looked to be at least 60. He wore a cloth raincoat and rubber boots. He was red in the face, obviously tipsy, since he staggered slightly as he walked. The second was younger, around 30, and had a strong build. As they came closer, I noticed streaks of gray in the younger Siberian's dark blonde hair. The elder of the 2 came up to me and said, "Hello there, traveler. So you're off to see Anastasia. We'll take you. It'll be 500,000 for the trip, plus 2 bottles surcharge." Footnote, 2 bottles of vodka. It was already clear to me that I wasn't the only one trying to reach Anastasia. That's why the price was so high. To them, I was just another pilgrim on my way to Anastasia's habitat. But still, I asked, how did you decide that I was going to see somebody named Anastasia and not just go to the village? If you be going to the village or no, you'd better have 500,000 ready. If you don't have the right amount, we won't take you there. Yegorich's tone toward me wasn't exactly friendly. They charge so much for the trip and yet don't talk very friendly, I thought. Why would that be? Still, there was no alternative, and I had to accept the terms. But instead of being happy at all that money, and especially the 2 bottles of vodka he sent his young assistant to buy at the settlement, his attitude toward me only hardened. He sat down beside me on a rock and kept muttering to himself. To the village. What village? 6 houses with people just barely alive. You call that a village? Who needs a village like that? Do you often take visitors to see Anastasia? I bet you earn a pretty penny transporting them, eh? I asked Yegorich, mostly to get a conversation going and soften his enmity. But Yegorich only answered in irritation. Who invited them to visit? We've got too many uninvited jerks barging in here. Nothing stops them. Did she invite them? Did she? No, she bloody well didn't. She told one bloke about her life. He goes and writes a book. Fine, write a book, but why give the location away? We never did. And here he meets with her once, writes about her life, and gives the place away. That's something even females can understand. If you give it away, that's the end of her peace and quiet. Does that mean that you've read the book about Anastasia? I don't read books. Sashka, my workmate here, he's a real bookworm. Anyway, we can't get you to the village tonight. Too far. The motor on the boat is not too strong. We'll make it as far as the fisherman's hut, and we'll spend the night there. Tomorrow, Sashka will take you on while I do a bit of fishing. All right, I agreed, thinking it was just as well that Yegorich had no idea that I was the one who wrote about Anastasia. Sashka, Yegorich's assistant, arrived with the vodka. Then they put the fishing tackle into the boat, at which point Yegorich's grandson, Vasya, all but cut the trip short. He started asking Yegorich for money to buy a new radio receiver. I've already fixed up a pole with an antenna. I've figured out how to set it up, said Vasya. And I've got the antenna wire already. All you have to do is plug the antenna into the receiver and you pick up a whole bunch of stations, right off. Footnote, Sashka, like Sasha, a diminutive of Alexander.